let's talk about those who have heard some good news today. The investors, of course, have heard bad news, but for employees of Reliance Industries, it has been good news. About 3.5 lakh employees will benefit because they have decided to roll back pay cuts. Now, why this is interesting is because Reliance is not the only one who's done this. They are the latest ones who have done this. There is a host of companies who have reverse their decision in full or partially to cut pay. Now remember, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the way it slammed the economy, a lot of companies had revenue losses and sort of passed them on to their employees. Jobs were lost and pay was cut also, in some cases as deep as 50%. It's a great sign that there is a reversal, but how wide is this impact? Is this limited just to a few companies? Are we going to see a larger trend? To speak on this, I'm joined now, of course, by Rituparna Chakraborty, Executive Vice President and co-founder of Teamlease, and Nitin Sethi, CEO, Performance and Rewards of Aon India, also join us. Welcome to both of you and great to speak with you on the show. Nitin, let me begin with you and your take on whether this is a wider trend. Are we going to see this progressively increase? More and more companies realizing that now perhaps they have to hold on to the employees that they still have and reverse those pay cuts?
Yeah. So, I'll take a bit of a step back, actually. You need to understand what really happened when the crisis or the pandemic came through. I think most of India, especially the large companies through March, April, May, I would suggest, actually froze increases, deferred increases, or took decisions to cut pays. Yeah, and I think the smaller firms started off a little after that because obviously they wanted to conserve cash, and that was most important because whenever the growth window opens up, it was cash was much needed. Now, having taken those decisions and reshaped businesses, prepared businesses for the future, as unlocks have started happening, we've seen a host of companies announcing, going back to normalized salaries. Some have announced pay hikes. So my first response is absolutely yes. I think we will see more of this. And the second thing to this is that, this also means that as the economy starts picking up, not that India is going to go back to double-digit increases, but, talent war in India hasn't gotten over in many sectors. And we will see, many companies, giving away reasonable pay increases in 2021.
Wow, that is optimistic if you're talking about pay increases in 2021. Rituparna, is this a wide enough phenomenon to start celebrating? Because you look at some of the names that have been reported, and we're running them on our screen, of the companies that have taken these decisions, and these are big companies. These are big companies who had either not effected very large pay cuts or have now really done well in some cases in the coronavirus pandemic. For example, your tech space or your ed tech, etc. Is this a wider, more secular trend?
Oh, absolutely. I think during the pandemic, just to see through the financial stress that most organizations were going through, various things happened. I mean, we've seen layoffs, we've seen furloughs, we have seen wage cuts, and we've seen some really drastic wage cuts. And after all the shakeups, I think organizations are kind of leaning towards a situation where most of them are considering or have already done it actually. Rollback of the pay cuts that have happened earlier. I think at the end of the day, organizations are dependent on the human capital that currently exists, and hence to keep in mind the morale of the employees, and also with a clear view that as the economy opens up, those who were high performing, and honestly in the layoff process, it's quite obvious that the organization took calls on bottom performers, so which means that the talent that currently exists are valuable and the ones who have been adding value to the company. So organizations become vulnerable if they do not start considering the situation. So we are seeing pretty much across most industries that there is a process of rollback, barring maybe a few, especially the distressed sectors. I think they're yet to catch up on it, but whether it's educational services, FMCG, financial services, technology, power energy, manufacturing. We're seeing this rollback happening across all kind of organizations. Organizations where it's still going to take some time to come to that state would be probably those in the hospitality sector, tourism, aviation, some of the lifestyle retail, but still might drag on for a while. But otherwise, we do see a sense. Actually, a few sectors are also considering revisions, like technology being one of them.
Yeah. Nitin, I want to understand the thinking behind this. Is it now that teams have become leaner and smaller? Hence, those that are still in these teams need to be motivated further? Or is demand actually in these sectors for fresh talent increasing, and it's a competitive sort of race to keep talent? What is the motivation behind this move?
Yeah. So, it's both of what you said. I think to the point that Rituparna also made earlier, I think at first go, companies cut costs. That means some employees were let off. There were furloughs and a bunch of other cost cutting measures that happened. So now what's remained in organizations is those lean teams, high performers, talent that company wants to retain as it actually now starts looking at some form of growth that would start kicking in, whether it's in Q4 this year or most of 2021. In fact, if you see the newspapers today, many of the rating agencies or economists are saying India could actually have growth anywhere between 7.5% to 11% next year. So in that sense, there is a degree of optimism, and most people want to have teams and talent that are engaged, that are driven, and certainly don't want to lose good talent out there. Now, having said that, there are absolutely sectors where there is even now war for talent. I think technology, venture-backed companies, startup companies, there is fairly aggressive hiring going on. Many companies that actually stabilize costs early on have also used this opportunity to kind of go out and hire talent that they would have in usual times not been able to lay their hands on. So it's a mix of both. I think there are good companies that are going out and hiring and building high quality leadership teams, hiring for hot skills. And then you want to retain the talent that you have, because that's important, and it needs to be engaged and driven as you kind of move into 2021.
Do you think, Nitin, that there is going to be a sort of spillover effect on salary increments? You mentioned this briefly earlier, that you would be seeing some sort of increments as well. Are there any specific sectors where this will take place, apart from IT tech? And if I may add one more layer, will this be restricted just to your top of the line large companies, or you will see this happening in smaller organizations as well?
No, I think salary increases in some form and manner you would see across the sector, across India Inc. The question is going to be how much. Will it be double digits that India saw 5-7 years back? I think the answer is unlikely. But you will, even in sectors beyond technology, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's venture-backed companies, you will actually see reasonable increases. I wouldn't put a number to it. We've got a big survey that's actually coming up, and reports will be released in a few days from now. But we do think numbers would be fairly bullish. I think what people thought of what numbers could look like in March, April is not what we've heard from companies, which is CEOs and business leaders of what it could look like in 2021.
Rituparna, let me get your take on sort of the broader trend that we are going to see. And we have been seeing over time a move towards more contract employment, more sort of gig workers and gig preferences from companies as well. Is that going to also escalate through all of this?
Yeah, I think you will see a change in the organization structures going forward, even when pandemic is done with, whenever we are done with it. So the earlier thought process where people used to hire a lot of permanent employees and some outsourced employees around, I think we will see emergence of more concentric circles of different forms of employment or engagement in organizations. You will have a much smaller core permanent employee base. You will see a lot of third-party contracts that will be happening. You will be seeing apprentices being hired in a bigger way. And you'll also see emergence of freelancers and gig workers. So essentially, as against the 2-layer hiring mechanism, you will see 4-5 layers of employee supplementation happening in organization, and this is here to stay. I mean, this is an important takeaway and learning organizations have had, that given that history itself is evidence enough to suggest that the incidence of accidents like pandemic has increased over the last few decades, and well, most likely things like this will happen, and hence the best way for organizations to be resilient is to have organization structures which are responsive to any kind of crisis, and hence having cost structures which are high on fixed cost is not conducive for situations like this. And not just this, I think organizations are becoming conscious about their cash positions. I mean, I personally believe that while we have been taking sectoral perspective in terms of who got affected in the pandemic, who did not, but I think it is not about being a large company or a big company. It is essentially about how you've managed your cash situation, what's your debt situation within the organization, how people intensive your businesses are, and of course, what's the kind of business you're in, how discretionary it is. So I think that's my outlook, and that's the trend that I'm seeing when I'm talking to different organizations. And I think this trend is going to be permanent in nature, if I may say so, where you will see emergence of all these concentric circles of employment in organizations.
Yeah. You know, the other question is that does this instill some sense of confidence in white-collared workers or salaried employees really to go out and spend and make those kind of commitments? Because that's the core here, right? Why it's also important when a large company decides to roll back is because you want to wait and see if others will do it, and will that in turn boost consumption. That's something which the finance ministry is really pushing for, but will companies really toe the line? Let me go to Nitin first on this point. Do you think that this is something which will now remain as a trend? Because there could be, God forbid, another spike in cases. We don't know where the end of this whole pandemic and its impact is still. Should people feel confident that they have turned the corner?
Yeah, well, I think, I can certainly answer this on behalf of, from a company's perspective, and then I'll come to, I think companies do feel that what they've done is they've cut corners, and they've got most efficient organizations in place. And that's the company, that's the workforce that they have to or want to keep as they manage the crisis. So I think the impact of this is on employees, and they know that no job is secure today, or anything could happen. But in the context that we've been through, I think the worst is behind us. Even if there was a second cycle, hopefully it's not going to be as long as the previous one. And then the growth does open up, and all economists do predict that India will have a fairly healthy growth rate for next 4 to 5 years. So in that context, I would say absolutely. If there are people in the organizations, whose pays have been kind of normalized. There is, I wouldn't say bullish, but, you can feel good about where you are.
Yeah, Ritu, you want to just answer that? If, people feel that kind of comfort, then they sort of reverse the trend in terms of consumption as well. From companies' point of view, do you think that confidence is setting in now?
I actually see cautious optimism right now, Tamanna, because people don't really know still whether we are at the beginning of the pandemic, the middle of the pandemic, or at the end of the pandemic. So yes, there is a slight amount of optimism, and one of the good things or the important consequence of the rollback would be that hopefully it would improve consumption. But I've been tracking the RBI consumer index quite closely, and if one were to look at that, I think consumers are still cautious. Of course, you will see these 3 months, which is October, November, December, we expect that there will be spike in consumptions because of the festival season. But honestly, we still are not sure how the behavior will change come December onwards or Jan onwards. So what I see is that the importance behind the rollback is to improve the morale of the current employees, retain good talent and the performers. It also will go to probably release some more cash out there for consumption. However, I would not rule out savings being a priority in the minds of many people. So I think I can sense that while there is optimism, organizations are not going overboard, and I think same goes for consumers. So at least the data suggests that. So we just have to wait and watch. This quarter is going to be key. I mean, actually, this quarter as well as Jan Feb would be very key to see how it's panning out for everyone.
Yeah. Well, we'll take the good signs when we can get it. Look at what's happening the world over. In Europe, in the US, things look like they were settling down, and then a spike in cases has sort of shaken the confidence of people and businesses. We'll wait and see how this pans out, especially after the festive season, and fingers crossed everything should be fine. But for now, a good trend that is coming out. Thank you so much, Nitin and Rituparna, for joining us on the discussion this evening.